A child presses a finger into the frozen ground. It does not yield. Beneath a thin crust of snow lies soil as hard as stone, locked away by months of relentless cold. Around them, the forest is silent. No birds call, no insects move. Even the wind seems to hesitate before crossing a landscape where almost nothing is willing to spend precious energy. Hunger has already become part of the air, and winter has only just begun. Most people imagine famine as an unexpected disaster, a season when nature simply fails. But for much of human history, famine was not an accident. It was a calendar. Every winter arrived carrying the same quiet question. Would the food last long enough for spring to return? Survival was rarely about finding more to eat. It was about slowing the speed at which life consumed itself. Long before agriculture transformed landscapes into fields, people understood something modern civilization rarely has to consider. The greatest enemy was not always cold. It was time. Every sunrise demanded calories the body could no longer afford to spend. Every unnecessary step was an expense. Every mistake carried compound interest. Hunger was not a sudden pain. It was a negotiation that stretched across months. This is why ancient winter camps often appear strangely inactive in the archaeological record. At first glance, it looks as though people simply waited. They did not. They calculated. Movement became strategy. Firewood was collected before the deepest snow arrived because gathering it later could cost more energy than the warmth it provided. Hunting parties became smaller. Journeys became shorter. Entire communities reorganized themselves around one invisible currency: metabolism. Our instinct tells us that desperate people would hunt constantly. That assumption collapses under biological reality. A failed hunt was catastrophic. Chasing an elk across deep snow could burn thousands of calories while yielding nothing at all. The body, already weakened by months of limited food, became less capable of recovering from failure. In many environments, starvation did not occur because people refused to hunt. It happened because hunting itself became too expensive. Nature offered another lesson. Wolves do not sprint endlessly through winter forests. Bears retreat into dens. Even small birds conserve astonishing amounts of energy by fluffing their feathers and reducing movement whenever possible. Humans could never hibernate, but they learned a similar principle. Sometimes the smartest survival strategy looked almost identical to doing nothing. That realization feels deeply uncomfortable because modern culture celebrates constant action. Yet evolution often rewarded restraint. Remaining near shelter, repairing clothing instead of searching for uncertain prey, sharing body heat, or preserving strength until weather conditions improved, these decisions rarely looked heroic. They simply increased the odds of seeing another sunrise. Archaeologists studying Ice Age settlements have uncovered evidence that survival depended upon planning seasons before hunger ever arrived. Animals were not merely hunted, they were harvested completely. Marrow hidden inside bones became concentrated calories. Fat surrounding organs was treasured far more than lean muscle. Skins became clothing capable of trapping warmth that food alone could never replace. Even tendons became cordage. Scarcity erased the distinction between waste and resource. Most people think meat was the greatest prize. In reality, fat often mattered more. Lean meat alone cannot sustain human life indefinitely. Researchers describe a condition sometimes called protein poisoning, where consuming large amounts of extremely lean meat without enough fat or carbohydrates can leave the body malnourished despite a seemingly full stomach. In the frozen north, calories hidden inside fat represented survival condensed into its purest biological form. Then came preservation, the quiet technology that existed long before written history. Winter itself became an ally. Meat froze naturally. Fish dried in cold winds. Smoke drifted through shelters for days, changing food chemically before invisible bacteria could claim it. Long before refrigeration, people discovered that controlling moisture often mattered more than controlling temperature. They learned this not through laboratories, but through generations of watching what disappeared and what endured. Yet no storage system could eliminate uncertainty. A single failed migration of animals, an early snowfall, a late spring, tiny disruptions echoed across entire communities. Hunger was rarely caused by one catastrophe. It accumulated through countless small disappointments until there was nothing left to absorb another failure. The human body responded with remarkable adaptations. As food vanished, metabolism slowed. Hormones shifted. The brain began prioritizing immediate survival over long-term thinking. Memories of food intensified. Smells became sharper. Entire mental landscapes narrowed toward one overwhelming objective: calories. Starvation was never simply physical. It quietly rewrote perception itself. Modern studies of prolonged starvation reveal something equally unsettling. People do not merely become weaker, their personalities often begin to change. Obsessions emerge. Conversations revolve around food. Dreams become filled with meals that do not exist. Identity slowly contracts until hunger occupies nearly every available corner of consciousness. The body is not only consuming fat reserves, it is reshaping the mind to solve the one problem that matters. Ancient communities knew another truth that biology alone cannot explain. Solitary survival was often an illusion. Archaeological discoveries repeatedly uncover individuals who survived severe injuries, illnesses, or disabilities that would have been impossible without years of care from others. During famine, cooperation became its own food source, not because it created calories, but because it reduced unnecessary losses. Shared fires required less fuel. Shared hunts spread risk. Shared knowledge prevented fatal mistakes. Still, cooperation carried painful choices. When supplies dwindled beyond recovery, every additional mouth altered the equation. History preserves stories of impossible decisions made during prolonged famines across many cultures. Some are undoubtedly exaggerated by legend, others are painfully real. Researchers continue debating exactly how frequently the darkest survival behaviors occurred. But the existence of those debates reveals something profound. Civilization is thinner than we like to believe. Hunger has always tested the boundary between moral ideals and biological necessity. Perhaps the most surprising discovery is that starvation rarely announces itself dramatically. It arrives quietly. A smaller portion today, a skipped meal tomorrow, a hunt postponed because the weather feels wrong, a child becoming strangely quiet, strength leaving muscles almost invisibly. Survival does not collapse in a single moment. It erodes grain by grain until one morning there is simply not enough left. And then, almost without warning, spring returns. Snow softens. Rivers begin speaking again beneath thinning ice. Birds appear as though summoned from another world. Plants push through frozen soil with astonishing determination. To modern eyes, spring feels beautiful. To someone who has survived months of hunger, it must have felt miraculous. Not because suffering had ended, but because possibility had returned. We often imagine our ancestors as fearless conquerors of nature. The evidence tells a quieter story. They survived not by defeating winter, but by understanding its rules more intimately than we understand our own abundance. They learned that endurance could be stronger than force, that patience could outweigh courage, and that life sometimes depends less on what you gain than on what you refuse to waste. Perhaps that is the unsettling lesson hidden beneath every ancient winter. Hunger was never simply the absence of food. It was a mirror held against human existence itself. Strip away comfort, certainty, and excess, and one question remains. The same question whispered across frozen forests thousands of years ago. How much of who we are survives when survival becomes the only thing left?